Aloha and welcome to Truth in Movies. I'm JayDreamerZ, and today we're breaking down a classic, The Wizard of Oz. This movie's been broken down. It's esoteric on so many different levels, and I feel like there's another way of looking at it. So I wanted to do this one. If you haven't seen it, don't worry. You'll get to know what happens in the movie as we go along. I'm going to give you my commentary on the esoteric breadcrumbs that are shared with us in The Wizard of Oz. And hopefully we'll try to stay away from some of the more popular, things that people talk about. And I'm going to share some interesting, new, and unique things with you guys. Let's start off. The Wizard of Oz. All right. So when we start things off, we're in Kansas. And as you can see, everything's very sepia tone, very monochromatic, black and white. And we've got Dorothy and her dog Toto. So what's happening right now at the very beginning is that Dorothy is running home. She's stopping to check on her dog Toto because there was this evil wicked witch lady that was basically trying to hurt Toto. So she's checking on Toto, making sure that Toto is okay. I want to check out the word Toto real quick. Now in Latin, it comes from totus or totos, which means the whole of something or something in its entirety, which also they still use in Spanish today. So if you say "eso es todo," that means like, is that everything? Is that all? But if we look further back to the root of toto, it's actually tet. It comes from the ancient Paleo-Hebrew alphabet, also known as Phoenician. They're very similar to one another. And it's called the tet. It's a circle with an X right in the middle of it. That's what toto means. Actually, technically, toto means of the tet. That O at the end is a vav. And it means of the, so it means of the tet. And if you look closely here, it says that the word tet can convey the meaning of to surround. It's not coming up here. Hold on. Surround, to contain something. It can also mean mud or clay. Essentially, it means like a wall or an enclosure, right? So keep this shape right here in mind. It's the same symbol for the X-Men. There's a lot of tet symbolism that I've talked about quite a few times on my channel. I believe that it refers to this place right here, the Garden of Eden, the North Pole land that used to be on many of the maps. We've covered that many different times, with Mount Meru being right there at the center of it, right? So as you can see, it shares that same circular pattern with the X shape in the middle. That X shape is made by 4 rivers that split this ancient land that once was on many of our maps at the exact middle of the North Pole. So we've got Dorothy who runs in. She's really upset about how her dog was just treated, which is the tet. By the way, she tells Toto represents the remnant of those who have come from the Garden of Eden, in my opinion, basically. And so every time she talks to Toto, it's like she's talking to some of us. So she says, "Let's go, Toto," immediately talking to the remnant, and she says, "Let's go." Now, Dorothy is an orphan. And I don't hear a lot of people talking about why Dorothy was chosen to be an orphan. I don't see that there was any need to have her an orphan in this movie, except for there's some things that the modern audience would have understood and related to at the time. This movie was made as the Dust Bowl was just finishing up, so people were coming out of the Dust Bowl. Also, it's about 30 or 40 years before that. There were lots of weird things happening in our world electromagnetically, like the Carrington event, the Tunguska event, and then soon after that we had the Dust Bowl and stuff too. And then so Dorothy runs around the corner and she's saying, "Aunt M, Aunt M." So M. They chose to have her call her Aunt M instead of Emily, to get the double M symbolism, which for me, the double M represents Mount Meru. Also, it represents Mother Mary, which is also symbolic of the mother of Jesus, right? The virgin that gives birth to the light of the world, which is the waters around Mount Meru on those maps that I was showing you, right? So those waters give birth to that light. And Mar means waters. It means seas, oceans, stuff like that. So Mari means my waters, essentially. And then, of course, if you turn the double M sideways, you get 33, which is said to be the circumference of Mount Meru, that it's 33 miles around. Now, why is she an orphan? I feel like there could be a link to the orphan trains that, started sometime around the mid-1800s and lasted right up until around the time that this movie came out. and they actually packed up a bunch of orphans. Some people were made orphans. Some people were kidnapped. Children were just taken from their families and put onto trains, and then they were sent by the thousands off into the Midwest, specifically places like Kansas, picked them up. It says here that the orphan trains operated between 1854 and 1929, just a couple years before the movie came out, relocating about 200,000 children. So now it starts to make more sense for me why we have this girl who looks like she has like a city girl look to her. You know what I mean? Doesn't look like she's been doing a lot of work or anything. She seems out of place on this farm, right? And her relatives, her aunt and her uncle, don't seem to be super close to her and treat her almost like she's a burden. It says that many of these children came from New York. And it says this relocation of children ended in 1930 due to decreased need for farm labor in the Midwest. So right around this time, there was a decreased need for farm labor, which means that they could have picked up Dorothy as a slave to work on their farms, which was not uncommon at the time. She goes up to her aunt and she's like, Aunt Em, just listen to what Mrs. Gulch did to Toto. So the witch's name in the real world is Mrs. Gulch, right? And let's look that up real quick to see what Mrs. Gulch represents. Gulch means essentially to swallow greedily, to gulp down, and to fall heavily. So it has this association with sinking, swallowing, slipping downwards, right? Which I believe is also stuff that happens up towards the North Pole when we go through these polarity shifts. Like, for example, you can see there used to be land at the North Pole. There used to be a place called Atlantis, and now it's just water. It has slipped down into the gulch, right? If there is still water there, then it stands to reason that land was swallowed up, right? It fell down into the gulch. So Toto was being threatened by the gulch, right? All the people that lived, the people of the Tet in the center of the world, they were being threatened by Mrs. Gulch. So her aunt just totally ignores her. Her uncle ignores her. They're like, this old incubator's gone bad. So they're really worried about their farming stuff. Remember, farming got a little easier around this time, and they didn't need as much slave labor because they started coming up with machines to help them on the farm. One of those machines is the incubator that the aunt and uncle are using in order to incubate the little chicklings. It's also interesting too because there was human incubators that also became popular right around the same time. If we look up the word incubation, it says it means basically to lie on top of something, from the Proto-Indo-European root word in, which actually means on, and kubare, which means to lie. So to lie on top of something is what it means to be an incubator. This is a sign. In the movie itself, right? This should have been a sign for Dorothy. It should have been a sign for her aunt and her uncle that this is not a good sign. It's not a good omen that the incubator is gone bad. The thing that lies on top of something else to promote life has gone bad. It's symbolically speaking about our world on the macrocosmic scale and our incubator, which is our dome or our sky, going bad, which leads to an apocalyptic event. He says we're likely to lose a lot of our chicks. So this is also showing you something on a small scale that represents stuff that happens in our world on the larger scale. The chicks represent us in the world as we go through an apocalyptic event. But Aunt Em, Miss Gulch, hit Toto right over the back with a rake just because she says that he gets into her garden. So if Toto symbolizes the people of the Tet, or the people from the original garden, then it makes sense that the story is Mrs. Gulch was upset at the people of the garden for trying to get into the garden, so they were kicked out of the garden, the people of the Tet, or the Tet-on, or the Tatar, or the Tatir, etc., right? All right, so you got this guy who's going to become a statue in the movie, and he says, someday they're going to erect a statue out of me. Which is, it could be symbolic for petrification, right? Whenever we go through these cataclysmic resets. And Dorothy says, or Dorothy's aunt is like, go find somewhere where you can't get in any trouble. She says, a place where there isn't any trouble. A place with no trouble. It's behind the moon. And then she starts singing Somewhere Over the Rainbow. And she says, behind the moon, somewhere over the rainbow. Behind the moon was really interesting, that she's this place that she wants to go to, which seems to be analogous to Oz, basically, right? That it's located behind the moon. If it's located behind the moon, that means that there's life inside of the moon, or on the other side of the moon, or in the dome of the moon above us or whatever. Somewhere over the rainbow, way up high. So she's talking about some other place. Now, in the modern world, she would be referencing space, right? You know what I mean? But she doesn't really talk about space. She doesn't seem to have the same cosmology as we do in modern academics today. She says, there's a land that I heard of. It's a mythic land. It's a legendary land behind the moon, once in a lullaby, which is really interesting too, because there's a lot of weird, strange lullabies out there that we're saying to children right before they went to sleep. It seems to me that the reason for this, thanks Jedi, thank you, I appreciate you. It seems that the reason for this was so that those things that were taught to children just before they slept would be meditated upon as they slept, so that they wouldn't forget them. So oftentimes our lullabies and nursery rhymes and stuff like that, they're like codes of hidden history and things that we have forgotten about, that we have, you know, out of tradition. We still share those things with children, but we forgot the meaning of them. She also says skies are blue. Now she's talking about an alien world. Isn't that interesting? Right? Why would the skies be blue in your little alien world? Because in real life, she shouldn't be seeing everything in sepia tone. She shouldn't be seeing everything in black and white. But she's singing as if she does see everything in black and white, which is super interesting to me too, because we talk about the two different worlds that we exist in. The world today of the blue sky, right? And then the world that is on the way, and the world that once was, which is the red sky, or the world of magic versus the world of non-magic. Even though her world right now is in black and white, it's kind of flipped backwards. The world that we're going into is the monochromatic world. It's a world with one light source that starts off purple, goes into red, goes into yellow, and then the pressure increases, and as the pressure increases, the color spectrum widens, so people can see different colors over time. So I believe that the movies are hearkening back to this time when the world was monochromatic, because the sun is constantly changing color, as is the moon and the stars and stuff. Right now, we're in the phase where they're all mostly white. Starseed Hologram, thank you for your donation. I appreciate you. All right, so she says, the dreams that you dare to dream really do come true. Right? So this is a place where dreams come true. It could be another world out there. I'm sure there's mythic and legendary worlds that are magical and enchanting and stuff, but our world will also become that one day. There's probably aliens on some other world somewhere out there that are singing this song about our world. You know what I mean? And someday my point is that that's going to happen to our world. Our world kind of sucks right now. It's gone down the toilet, but one day the golden age will return. Everything is cyclical. Someday I'll wish upon a star and wake up where the clouds are far behind me. So she's talking about going up into the sky. Bluebirds fly. So she talks about bluebirds in this musical number as well. I've seen a lot of bluebird symbolism, from K-Pax, the movie K-Pax, where they had the bluebird of happiness, to Back to the Future, where they had the Bluebird Motel. There's various other ones. I can't remember all of them off the top of my head, but there's a lot of references to bluebirds in movies specifically. And I believe that the bluebird is the thunderbird. The bluebird is symbolic of a world filled with magic, because that blue bird is really a blue beam of light that shoots out of our world. It's plasma that shoots up and sprouts out wings and, takes all kinds of different shapes up in the sky. But that is what I believe is the bluebird symbolism. Birds fly over the rainbow, so why can't I? Right? Why can't I fly over the rainbow? Good question. All right, so we meet the witch, Mrs. Gulch. Dun, 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 dun. She's on her little bicycle, right? We're going to come to that basket right behind her in just a second. But Mrs. Gulch is pissed off because Toto allegedly bit her when she was in the garden. So she's coming to take Toto away and have him killed. Now, I'm going to tell you who Dorothy represents once she actually gets to Oz. But I can tell you right now, she represents the truth seekers in all of us. And Mrs. Gulch represents those Karens of the modern world. I don't really like using that term, but everybody knows what that word or whatever means. Sorry if your name's Karen. I super feel bad for you. But anyways, she represents our modern world. This is the world of law. This is the world where a system has been set up that ultimately protects people who are criminals and hurts people who are not. It hurts the innocent. Dorothy is innocent. You know what I mean? She says, I'm taking him to the sheriff and make sure that he's destroyed. Right? So Toto represents us, us of the remnant, us who have that goodness of our soul inside of us still, we have not succumbed to the evil in the world. This woman represents the system and the people in that system who would like to see all of us destroyed. It's a war, right? They just haven't outright declared actual war yet. Right now, it's just, it's a bunch of invisible handcuffs in the forms of laws and rules and regulations and certificates and diplomas and doctorates, etc. And so she tries to use that against Aunt Em and Uncle Henry. She tries to use, it's magic. She's this witch. She's a witch. And anyone in the world like this that uses these types of spellcraft from your mouth, right? When you threaten people with the laws and all this other type of stuff, those are spells that you're casting, that people are casting at one another. So this is what it looks like in our world today when people practice spellcraft. It's not that it's gone. It's not that it doesn't exist. It has just changed form. Laws and all that other weird stuff, they don't exist except for in our minds. Whatever we allow and choose to enter in, to believe in it, to manifest it, and to make it real, then it becomes real to you. So that's what she's doing right now. This is she's just casting a weak spell. I don't know. Anyways, we move forward and she says, destroyed Toto. Oh no. See, she wants to protect Toto or those of the Tet, right? So the witch says, unless you want to go against the law. Now that's a huge threat in our day and age, right? Because the law is the system. It's a system that protects evil witches, which do exist today. Okay. Warlocks, witches, all kinds of stuff. People who practice bad energy and putting bad energy onto others in order to change them so that they're bad too. That's what we fight against in this world today, right? Unless you want to go against the law, there is no law to go against. It doesn't exist except for in your head. You know what I mean? All right. Then she grabs, they're like, yeah, we don't want to go against the law. We're so scared of the system. We're so scared of doing the right thing. Anyways, I don't like Aunt Em. I'm going to tell you that right now. I do not like Aunt Em. I do not like Uncle Henry. I don't like the witch, obviously. So they get all scared and they put Toto into this basket. Now remember, Toto represents those of the Tet. The Tet symbol is literally a basket. Right? That's one of the symbolic elements of this particular glyph. It's a circle with an X in the middle. It can also mean snake because that's where the snake of the garden resides. Okay? That's where the plasma is at the middle of our world, etc. And it also means surround because in that North Pole map that I was showing you, that land is a valley surrounded by huge high mountains. So it's seen as being the breadbasket of the earth itself. It's seen as being the navel of the earth, the place of life for the earth. So it's appropriate that she takes Toto and locks him into the basket because that's actually, where he belongs. All right. So she says, I got you back. Toto totally jailbroke. He took off and left the witch in the dust bowl and came back to visit Dorothy. And she says, we've got to run away. Now she's talking to us, some of us, okay? You know who you are, right? If you're those of the Tet, if you have the blue beam remnant inside of you, you already know, okay? It's not for me to tell you if that's you or not. You'll just feel it and you'll know inside of you that you're vastly different. You're a different energy than the rest of the world. So she says, we've got to run away. We've got to get away. And that's why the people of the Tet are seen as being chickens. They're seen as being scaredy cats. They're seen as being people who run away, yellow bellies, etc. And you'll see this type of symbolism in the movie all of the time. Often, these people are represented by chickens. You'll see a lot of chicken symbolism, just like how we broke down in Monty Python and the Search for the Holy Grail. Sir Robin bravely ran away, right? That's because him and that entire crew of the Knights of the Round Table or the Valley of the Garden, the Basket of Life, right? They run, right? They stay in one place, and then whenever trouble comes in the form of cataclysms, they do one of two things. Either they have been scattered throughout the earth and they're called to come back to the center, to come back to the garden, or they're already at the garden. Another cataclysm happens and something prevents them from staying there. So they have to scatter. They have to run away every time. They run away and then they run back. And when they run back, usually the world is so about to go into such chaos that there's wars and there's all types of things. So they're all seen as a bunch of people, a whole nation that ditched their countries to go on this journey, to go on this trek. Lindsay, $8 from Lindsay. Thank you. I appreciate you, Lindsay. All right, moving forward. Whoa, also, I would be remiss if I didn't include Back to the Future, right? Marty McFly is constantly called chicken all throughout the entire thing. Why is that such a big deal? Like, why was that crucial to that entire franchise that they constantly had to call Marty McFly a chicken? Because he's a time traveler, and time traveler is symbolic of someone who survives one condition and goes into a new condition, a new living condition that looks like a new time. It looks like they have time traveled because they wake up into a post-apocalyptic world. So they've changed times, basically, right? All right, so she's running away from home. She gets to Professor Marvel. He's got this little circus shack thing built up here. Professor Marvel. Let's check out his name. Why was he named Professor Marvel? Acclaimed by the crowned heads of Europe. That's interesting too. Crowned heads. That means a head with horns, right? That's where that comes from. They say that some of those beings that first landed from other worlds, that they had horns. And people can grow horns too. That's where the whole crown thing comes from. The word crown literally means horns. So they're putting horns on their head. That's where the word corn comes from, corona, etc. All right, so the crown heads of Europe, past, present, future, etc. Let's move forward. I want to break this name down real quick. So if you separate Marvel, just the name or the word from the movies, right? The Marvel franchise, it starts with the letter M, which is a word in and of itself. In the ancient languages, the letter M meant coming out of the water. It was written as the top of the water, like waves, and then a line that came up and met those waves, often actually sometimes shooting out of the waves, but it meant to come up out of the water, basically. So M is out of the water. AR means light, and by extension, fire. Okay. Usually it's translated in the modern age. A lot of people translate that as fire. I don't. I go further back to when it meant light. So out of the water, light. And then the V right there, you may have noticed that in ancient times, the further back you go, the V used to be a U. It's the letter U. And it's also the Vav. And the Vav is the sixth letter of the Hebrew and the Phoenician alphabets. And it is a word picture of a hook. And it implies attached to something else. So if it comes after out of the water, light out of the water, right? It means of the light out of the water. That's what that means. And then El basically is an ancient word that today is translated as meaning God, but in the old times it simply meant strong or mighty leader. So a strong or a mighty leader of the light out of the water. That's what that means, which means it's basically a way of saying wizard. It's basically a way of saying heroes, wizards, strong leaders, mighty leaders, gods, etc. All right, so she pulls up. She meets Professor Marvel, and he's he sees that she's running away from home. He's kind of concerned about her. He's going to try to send her back home because he doesn't want to really deal with a runaway at this moment. He says, yeah. I see in my crystal ball, it looks like I see a woman. And she's like, yeah, that's Aunt Em. That's Aunt Em. And he goes, yes, her name is Emily. And he's kind of portrayed as a shyster in the movie. He has good intentions, but everything that he does isn't real magic per se. You know what I mean? It's kind of trickery, right? So obviously her name is Emily. I mean, there's not a lot of things it could be, right? If it's Aunt Em. So he says, yes, her name is Emily. Well, what does Emily mean? Emilia is where it comes from, or Emily in French. And it says to see the name Emile, E-M-I-L. What does Emile mean? Emile means imitating or rivaling, a rival, an imitation of something, right? This is why I don't like Aunt Em. She's not good news. So emulation means to copy, basically. It means a copy of something, a replica, right? And if she's Mount Meru, then she's a replica of Mount Meru or a type of Mount Meru. All right, so she says, that's right. What is she doing? She becomes really concerned about her Aunt Em, right? I don't know if you have seen Return to Oz. Return to Oz is part 2, and it picks up where this one leaves off, right? A little while afterwards. So let me tell you about Aunt Em in the future, because if this dude is reading the future, as it's kind of shown to us, you know what I mean? This is what Professor Marvel should say. He should be warning Dorothy. He should be giving her a big fat warning, looking into her future, into the Return to Oz, and to see what Aunt Em's going to do to her. So it says Aunt Em makes a comment on Dorothy not being much help. Hold on, I'm going to read this again. Aunt Em makes a comment on Dorothy not being much help to her from her lack of sleep at night. So when Dorothy gets back from Oz in part 2, she has trouble sleeping at night. You know what I mean? And I'm going to talk about the trouble sleeping thing too. And so Aunt Em scolds her for wasting time on Oz before taking her to shock therapy, which is administered by Dr. J.B. Worley. Aunt Em mentions her sister, Garnett, who has offered to lend the money to pay for Dorothy's shock therapy. Dr. Worley calls her Mrs. Blue. So in part 2, Aunt Em, instead of her last name being Gale, it is now Mrs. Blue. They changed her name. That's really interesting too. I'm going to talk about the blue correlation in just a bit. But that does contradict her last name in this film right here. So what he should have said is, what's she doing? What's she doing? He should have said, oh my God, she's strapping you down to a chair in a room and you can't move. And they're attaching electrodes to your ears and they're about to shock the crap out of your brain. Maybe then, right, we would have a different movie, but we don't. So anyways, he doesn't tell her what happens in the future. He just sends her back home, basically. And he says, there's a storm blowing up, a whopper. Of course, there's going to be a storm when you go into these transitional periods in the movies where they're symbolically showing you the cataclysms that happen to reset our world. Oftentimes, it is a storm, a huge storm, a storm unlike no other storm. They did a really good job. I took a picture of this one because it looks like she's holding on to the tornado. This has been on my bucket list my entire life. I want to take a picture of me holding a tornado. I just thought that would be cool. Anyways, they did a really good job. Like, this movie's old, really old. And that tornado scares me every time. That looks like a real tornado. I'm impressed, actually. So, and actually all of the little special effects in this movie are amazing. They were way ahead of their time. I love it. So she says, come on, get in the cellar. Acting's good. Everything's good in this movie. It's really good. She says, come on, get in the cellar. So there's another cellar door reference, right? Another reference to people going into the cellar and then magic things happening or spooky things happening or something like that. And the cellar being a place of safety too. That's the cellar door to our world. She says, Annie M, Uncle Henry. She's literally banging on the cellar door. Nobody opens it up. Like, it's, you kind of guess that they can't hear her, but she's just an orphan. She's not even family. Like, she came on a train probably, So they leave her up top. She goes into her room, hits her head on something and passes out. Now, here's where there's a difference. There's lots of differences between the book, The Wonderful Wizard of Oz, and the movie. In the book, she literally actually physically goes to Oz. In the movie, she hits her head and it's all a dream, right? So which one is right? The movie took some liberties with the book. I'll let you think about that one. Overprotected. I just got a $20 donation. Wow, thank you. I appreciate you. Thank you. All right, so she looks out the window and what does she see? First image is chickens. I mean, there's a turkey there and there's a rooster there, but in general, there are a bunch of chickens. It's a little chicken coop, right? That's symbolic of the Tet, like I talked about, the people of the Tet who run away from danger. Hey, welcome to my channel. I didn't see who that was, but welcome. All right, so she looks out of the window and she's like, oh, Mrs. Gulch, right? So this Gulch is also following her into Oz. Mrs. Gulch transforms into the Wicked Witch. I can't do it. Sorry. Amazing actress. Amazing. She played the best part. I like all the acting in this movie. It's really good. Now, she gets up after the house falls down and lands or whatever. She goes to the front door and we go from sepia tone or monochromatic to a world filled with color. Two different worlds, a black and white world and a world filled with color. You're going to see this symbolism in a lot of different movies, right? I think The Majestic had this. What was that one called? With the guy who keeps the secrets or whatever. Damn, I forgot the name of it. You know what I'm talking about? The one with Jeff Bridges. There was The Giver. That's what it was called, right? It was called The Giver. They do this in a lot of movies where you start off monochromatic, but then color starts to seep its way in, right? So that's indicative of two different living conditions on our world that we live in, two different lighting conditions. She opens it up, she goes in, and this is the world filled with magic. Also, this is, because it's so colorful, they may have them flipped backwards because the magic world starts off monochromatic, but then colors start to be exposed as pressure builds up, as I was talking about, right? So it could be that we're getting a glimpse of the magical world during the time of color, whenever it's already pressurized and stuff, which means that this magical world she just entered into is about to go through their apocalypse, right? Which is what we're going to watch. So she walks into the colorful, magic, Willy Wonka looking world, takes a look around. Notice what she's wearing. Blue, right? She's wearing the color blue. So, blue is all over. It's in her hair. It's on her shoes and her socks or not her shoes, but her socks and stuff like that. So she's walking around this little Willy Wonka looking park or whatever. Bradley Francis, hey, good to see you. Just like Alice when she walks into Wonderland. Actually, these two are very similar to one another. Many people have picked up on the symbolism between Alice and Dorothy. Both of them dressing very similar to one another. Both of them wearing blue. Both of them go into wonderful places, wonderful worlds. Both of them were outcasts. They were black sheep in the world that they were in. They felt like something was wrong with that world. It was very boring and they didn't like the system. Now, you might think that the difference between them was the hair, but Dorothy had blonde hair when they first made this movie. They thought that it didn't look right on her, so they changed it during the movie, but they actually put a whole bunch of makeup on her and they gave her a blonde wig to wear. This is actually a real picture from, the movie when they first did it. Can you imagine Dorothy with as a blonde? You know what I mean? But she's basically Alice. Both of them are the exact same character. They're the exact same entity. Not the same person, because they're just cartoons. They're cartoonifications of an entity, which is the blue beam, the earth energy that changes our world from the mundane to the magical. That's what she represents. Oh man, okay, so I just want to say thank you to Tracy who donated $50 in the chat. That blows my mind. I super appreciate you, Tracy. Thank you very much. And also a big shout out to Linda who just gifted some memberships. Thank you both very much. All right, so we've got these two who represent the blue beam or the blue beam of happiness or the blue bird of happiness or however you want to see it, right? She starts walking around Munchkinland and take a look at that spiral. I'm going to come back to that spiral in just a second. It's actually really important because that's her starting point. Or the finishing point, depending on how you look at it, right? Now, she's walking around and this orb shows up. Have you ever seen one of these? Literally an orb of energy just floating around. I've seen one, okay? I've seen that exact same thing, except for me, it wasn't colorful. For me, it was more translucent, like a bubble. But I've seen these. I've seen orbs, actually. Hey, thanks again, Linda. Super appreciate you. Oh, BCB jumped on that membership. Good to see that. Welcome, BCB. All right, so this orb floats in. I'm going to tell you exactly what the orb is, in my opinion, okay? My perspective on these orbs is that is ball lightning, or a form of what we call ball lightning. I'm sure there's different degrees to how powerful those balls can get, but for me, this is a perfect example of ball lightning, which in the past, when we research the myths and legends and stuff, has been described as fairies and pixies and stuff like that just floats about. Sometimes they're small, sometimes they're large. My research has indicated that they can be as small as the palm of your hand or as large as, about maybe like 5 feet in diameter or something like that. Pretty big, right? This is also Attack of the Killer Tomatoes in the world to come. Okay, so people will see a bunch of these things that are attracted to electromagnetic activity, aka humans, and they will chase you. It depends on the electricity involved. It depends on what your charge is versus what that thing's charge is, etc. But it has the potential to actually follow you around, and you would want to get away because you don't want to get electrocuted. Right? And you don't want to get sucked into it like the blob or something, right? So she shows up in her Attack of the Killer Tomatoes blob, and she looks like a traditional pixie, fairy, princess type. She has a huge hat, which has horns on it, just like we were talking about earlier, right? It doesn't need to be that long. The reason that those hats or those coverings or coronas or crowns or whatever, the reason that they had such long, elongated ones was because those beings, not symbolically energy, not energetic beings, but real physical other alien beings that come down from other worlds are said to have conical shaped heads, large heads, huge heads, right? Which you actually see another example of that in the newer Alice in Wonderland, where the Red Queen has a big old huge head, right? She's got, looks like, those are her shoulders. It looks like she has wings and stuff, but that's really her shoulders. Here's some examples of drawings from actual accounts of people who witnessed ball lightning. The ball lightning will fly in at random. It typically scares people. It will go into your house if your house is not locked up. So it will come down the chimney. By the way, which is exactly why Santa Claus comes down the chimney, because he is not a physical, actual entity or being. He is an energetic, I forgot the word, thing. He's an energetic play. Anyways, you know what I mean, right? Santa is electricity, essentially. All right, so here's some other ones. Ball lightning would just come in. Now, here's a really interesting thing, too. I'm going to do a video about the Tunguska event, and we're going to talk about ball lightning. It can explode as well. But oftentimes when this stuff kind of comes in, it's attracted to electricity. So eyewitnesses will say that they watched this ball float around and then it went into the television, or that it went into their radio and it turned those things on or off or whatever. This is possession. This is what it looks like when a ghost or a spirit or whatever comes into the physical world, and you can engage it and see what it's doing, and because it's luminous, right? So we've got many different examples of ball lightning, balls of energy floating about, scaring people, interacting with the physical world itself. So she looks around, and the Good Witch of the North, we're going to talk about those directions and stuff. The Good Witch has been crushed by Dorothy's house. Excuse me. She says, that's all that's left of the Wicked Witch of the East. Let's take a look at the Wicked Witch of the East, or what's left of her. She looks like the bottom of a Muppet. That does not strike me as real. I know it's just a movie, but whatever. Anyways, she's got these ruby slippers. We'll talk about those in a second. But the only clues we give as to what she represents are her striped stockings, her striped socks, basically, right? They're black and white stripes. Black and white symbolism together on my channel and in my research so far implies space travelers, okay? People who go from world to world. Sometimes they're seen as time travelers, but usually they're some sort of space agency or space travelers, etc. They're people that hop from world to world. I've explained that in many videos, so we're just going to move forward, but keep that in mind. She represents somebody who has an association with space itself, or what we call space in the modern age. She says, I'm Glinda, Witch of the North. So we had a witch that was represented by a direction. Why? You know what I mean? Why is there need for witches to represent particular directions? So this was the Wicked Witch, some sort of an evil energy that was represented by the East. This is a good energy that is represented by the North. So if we put this onto an ancient cosmological view of our world, we can easily associate these witches with places, right? So for example, the Dead Witch up here at the top represents the East. In the old world, East was up, West was into the earth, okay? It's not the same these days, but I've did a whole video on it called East is Up in one of my playlists. It's like all yellow. Anyways, so the space traveler, etc. Basically, I'm just going to tell you, she represents the red plasma, the bad plasma that was coming down into this world during their apocalyptic cycle, and it was cut off when that electromagnetic barrier, aka the house of our world, right, the roof of our world or whatever, goes back up. So it's seen as like the house crushing her and cutting off her legs. Sometimes it's seen as like cutting off the fingers. Usually it's like fingers. Sometimes it's a hand because the hand has the fingers. In this case, it's the leg and the toes. This is just symbolic imagery for plasma that separates into smaller branches of itself, the Hydra, etc. Right? So she's the Wicked Witch of the East up top, and then we go back down and we can see that West was down. So the Wicked Witch of the West represents the energy changing from being the negative energy up here in the sky to going down underneath the earth into the inner recesses of the earth, known as Sheol or other places. And then the North. The North is at the North Pole, and it's good, right? It's always good. In all these movies, they want you to go north. We're headed north. Oh, I heard there's a place of safety in the north or whatever, right? They do that all the time. So she says the Munchkins are happy because you freed them from the Wicked Witch of the East. So the blue beam, which is what Dorothy represents, which we'll break down Dorothy's name too. But the blue beam, when you see that appear, it means that the electromagnetic energy of our world has reversed completely, which means that the polarity reversal is finished when you see the blue beam. So when that blue beam goes up, that means that dome, the roof of our house, has also gone back up and cut off that negative energy from the top. So Dorothy literally does save the Munchkins. She says, who are those people? They're the little people who live in this land. Now, if she landed at the North Pole, like she should, because that's the entrance point, right? Is at the apex of all of these worlds, including our world. That's where the gods land. They land on a huge mountain. Mount Meru, Mount Sinai, Mount Olympus, all of these holy mountains of old. And that mountain is in the middle of an island mass. Let's check it out, right? It says Munchkinland is where you are. You are their national heroine. Interesting choice of words, giving the poppy scene later in the movie. But let's check it out. Can we find a place where there are little people on the old map of the North Pole, aka the Garden of Eden? Yes, we can. Check this out. Right here. You see that? Let me zoom in just a bit for pal. You can see it says pygmy. Now this whole thing is written in Latin, which I have translated. Basically, oh, actually, let me just go to the next slide here. So I circled it for us. All right, I'm gonna read this according to memory, so don't quote me on it. But it says something along the lines of, the pygmy live here. They are a maximum of 4 feet tall, and they're the exact same beings as what the people of Greenland call Skrelingers, or Skraeling, basically, right? What is a Skraeling? They're saying that these pygmy people, which are little tiny people, which are the exact same as the Munchkins, are akin to Skraeling. Well, let's look up pygmy first. It says member of a fabulous race of dwarves. So right there, the origin of pygmy is directly related to dwarves, right? And if you tuned in on my channel when we were breaking down the Colburn Bible, as a matter of factly mentions dwarves, right, as living, coexisting with human beings. And it says dwarves described by Homer and Herodotus, right? 2 famous historians. I'm guessing people just throw away this whole dwarven talk. They treat these ancient historians as a salad bar. They're like, ooh, he said globe. I like that. I'm going to take that. Oh, he said dwarf. Ooh, no. We're not going to teach people about that. You know what I mean? Salad bar of history. Oh, and then it says that Homer and Herodotus both said that the dwarves were said to inhabit Egypt or Ethiopia and India. That's interesting. I haven't heard too many stories of dwarves in Ethiopia or in Africa and stuff like that. I have heard many stories of dwarves up further north, towards the north, right? I'm not saying they couldn't have moved around or anything, right? But I will tell you that this is more evidence for me that the places known today as Egypt and Ethiopia, etc., were not always called that there were other places where those of the Tet had lived once, and they used to be the old Ethiopia and the old Egypt, and then whenever they scattered and spread out, they just named the new land after their old homes. That's all. Now, Skraeling. What is a Skraeling? It says ancient Norse name for inhabitants of Greenland encountered by the Viking settlers there. The Old Norse Skraelingar, which is plural, apparently literally means little men. Skraeling also can mean to shrink or shrunken. Shrunken people, shrunken humans. I'll tell you right now, you are a Skraeling. I am a Skraeling. It just depends on what you're comparing us to, right? If you compare us to how tall and how large we're going to get after the next reset happens, we're tiny, tiny little people, right? We're going to grow in stature once again. Also, the ancient legends talk about how humans used to be way bigger as you go further back in time. They lived a lot longer. They were way bigger. But it seems that there is a shrinking spell cast over our world. Here's a map of Oz and its surrounding areas. Check this out. Okay, I'm just going to share this real quick with you. First of all the way around these 4 lands at the middle that has Emerald City directly in the middle of it. You see the correlation already? There is what's called the impassable desert and the shifting sands, the great sand wastes. This is all a desert all the way around, right? And then, of course, around that desert, you can see there's these other countries and stuff like that, right? There's all these other countries, very much like the North Pole map that we've seen time and time again, that has a little section for munchkins or pygmies or Skraelings, etc. But on this one, all the way around it is water, which means on this map, if it is the same, if Oz actually represents Earth, or a type of Earth, like I totally think it does, then this is showing you a map of Earth during the time of fantasy, during a time that has been long forgotten to us in the modern age. And during that time, there was no water. There were no oceans back then. The oceans were removed. What happens if you remove all of that water? You get desert. So it stands to reason that there would be desert all the way around the land of Oz. Susan Donahue gave me $10. Thank you, Susan. Thank you, Susan Donahue. I appreciate you. All right, so we move forward. She says, I'm Dorothy Gale from Kansas. Okay, sweet. Let's break down Dorothy Gale and see if it adds up to our guess that she represents the blue beam, right? What does Dorothy mean? It says Dorothy literally means gift of God, from doron, or gift. From the Proto-Indo-European root word do, which means to give, and theos, or dios. Sometimes it's Dios, sometimes it's Theos, which means God. The gift of God is Dorotheos. If you reverse that, it's Theodorus or Theodore, right? She's the gift of God. She's the blue beam. That's the gift. The gift is that the world fills up with energy and magic. You don't have to sleep anymore. You don't have to eat as much, if at all. You get superpowers. You get to live a lot longer. It's definitely seen as a gift. And that's what Dorothy represents. How about gale? Well, a gale, some people have heard of gale force winds, right? That's what this is talking about and alluding to. It says that the Old Norse and Old English words are from the same source, the word yell. That's interesting. So gale, which we interpret as, and it has an association with the wind, also has an association with yelling. I mean, you do make wind when you yell, right? So if we look this up, the word yell, because we're looking up Dorothy's last name, Dorothy Gale. Right? Let's look up Gale. So it says you need to see the word gel. So if we look up the Proto-Indo-European root word gel, which means to call, we find that there is actually an alternative version, which means to shine. So Dorothy Gale means the gift of God that shines, or the shining gift of God. That's what her name means. The light, the blue beam, basically, right? So she's talking about how Dorothy fell from a star. That's interesting. It wasn't just out of the sky. She didn't go through some dimensional thing or whatever. She fell out from a star, the North Star. That's the star that they're talking about. She would fall. It stands to reason, straight down. She fell from the sky. This is another reference to the Anunnaki, the Anakim, etc. Those beings who came down from the skies. We are going to be, some of us, I don't say we, some humans have plans on leaving the Earth during the next polarity shift, okay? They will land right in the middle of some other world, and they will be seen as the beings who came from the skies, who fell down to the Earth. All right, so the little munchkins all start coming out. She's a giant in comparison. She says that she fell very far, and then it shows this little munchkin for no reason whatsoever, just coming up out of a sewer system in the middle of the Golden Road. What do you call that? Yellow brick road, right? Check it out. Why would they show you that? Like, why? That took time and energy to put that. There's no need. There's no sewer systems in the movie or anything that's alluded to. It's because of the shape that was going to be on the sewer lid. It's that same circle with the same X in the middle with another little circle right in the middle of that. All right, so they say, wake up, you sleepyhead. They started going into song and dance and stuff, right? Wake up, you sleepyhead. The movie's talking to you. It's talking to all those people at the time, right? Also, keep in mind, this was made during just after the Dust Bowl, like we were talking about, right? When everything was very dusty and dark and dingy looking and stuff. And you may have noticed on pictures going further and further back that they had more of a yellow chromatic sort of tone to them. I believe that the movies were probably letting people know at the time, you're going to start seeing more colors in your world, right? Talking to us of the modern age when this movie came out. But they're saying, wake up, you sleepyhead. They're talking to the sleepers of the world. Wake up. The wicked witch is dead. Wake up. That's when we wake up. Right now, we're all sleepy. I'm sleepy. You could tell by just looking at my face. I'm tired. I find it hard to sleep these days. Depression is rampant, anxiety, etc. People are only, when we're awake, we're just going through motions, man. I'm still kind of sleeping throughout the day. It takes me hours to actually wake up. You know what I mean? But this is the age of sleepwalkers. That's the age we live in. Now, this age of sleepwalkers is ruled by the old energy that filled this world during the last apocalyptic cycle. How do I know that? Because all that energy comes into our world, it's cut off, but there is no blue beam to replace it. There's no blue magic leaving the earth and filling our world back up with positivity and goodness. So that existing energy that was cut off, which is negative, right, or bad or evil, it goes into bodies, it procreates, it makes person after person after person, and the majority of the world turns evil over time, basically. This is all my perspective and stuff like that. You don't have to see it my way, it's fine. Anyways, wake up, you sleepyhead. So when the wicked witch is removed, and when Dorothy comes back to our world, or that blue beam comes back, that's when we wake up. That's when you'll be revitalized, filled with energy all of the time. Like it'll truly be like we're waking up. Also, there will be telepathic abilities and stuff like that. So people will not need to access the internet or go researching for things or whatever, that some people, many people, I believe, will just intuitively tune in and just get information from the Akashic records or from the ether itself. It says, she's gone where the goblins go, the wicked witch. That would be under the earth, right? The west. She's gone where the goblins go. That's where the goblins live. Or the gobblers, right? That's what goblins are sort of named after. They're the eaters or predators, I guess you could say, right? They're basically meat eaters. They're gobblers. They're people you want to stay away from because they will eat you, right? They are Elvins, the elven race who eats meat, or humans or whatever, right? They've gone where the goblins go. That's interesting because Mrs. Gulch, who is the witch who went where the goblins went, that's what her name means, to swallow up. Goblins, swallow, the underworld. You see the connections? It says, then this is a day of independence. Of course it is. This is the day of Jubilee. This is the day when you will all be set free. Wow, there's a lot of people watching. I just saw that. Well, welcome to my channel. This is the day of independence. This is when you will be set free. This is on Independence Day, which is around the summer solstice, right? It's not exactly on the summer solstice these days because we have changed our calendar. But if you count 13 days out from the actual summer solstice, you come to the 4th of July. And our calendar has been shifted by exactly 13 days. As you can see here, there's another blue beam. I actually think there's two blue beams. There's a good one and there's the Antichrist. There's a blue beam of death that comes down from above, from the sun, basically, as it spirals around to the North Pole, which we're going to talk about in just a second. Now, the Wicked Witch comes, the Wicked Witch of the West. She's got all her stuff, and she's like, she always arrives and leaves in red smoke. So that's another indicator. Her face is green, which to me indicates the inner earth, because it's got the aurora borealis and the inner earth energy, right? But she's wearing black. And I'm going to talk some more about a theory that I have. At first, I thought she may have represented Mount Meru as well, but I don't think so anymore. I'm going to tell you my theory in just a second. So the Wicked Witch pops up, and Glinda, which means good, by the way, it just means good, says, this is the Wicked Witch of the West. Wicked Witch of the West. WWW. Or Vav, Vav, Vav. Or UUU, VVV, FFF. Those are all the same letters, basically. House Lost Tribe, good to see you. Or 666. These are all the number 6, WWW. Wicked Witch of the West. That's why they chose to name her that. They could have just called her the Wicked Witch, you know what I mean? Or they could have called her the Evil Witch of the West, but that wouldn't have fit as well. She's worse than the other one was. She's worse than the one from above was cut off real quick. It's only in here for like a few days, right? This other one stays underneath us and tries to make its way back up, right? She's that energy. It says, there they are, and there they'll stay, talking about her ruby slippers. We're going to come back to those slippers a little towards the end, but they were not always ruby, actually. They only changed it to ruby for this movie. It's very interesting. So they represent power. Where the blue beam gets its power from, my theory is that it represents the anode and cathode mountains, which meet in the middle to form the legs of the blue beam. So that's one of my theories right now. And then she says, oh, rubbish, you have no power here. So at the North Pole, which is where they are symbolically, because that's where Glinda is, she's the Witch of the North, the Witch of the West has no power. She doesn't have the power to affect people in a negative way. That negative energy doesn't have the power to affect you and I at places like the North Pole. So she disappears in a fire. Poof. She's like, you better watch out. I'm gonna totally kill you in the future. Threatens her and everything. They don't do anything to the Wicked Witch because they're good people, right? So they just let her leave in a ball of flame, which is really interesting. I was watching these munchkins and I noticed that it seems like she was hiding in the dress of one of the munchkins. It was really interesting. So she says, oh, what a smell of sulfur. All this smoke and stuff that she just left the smell of sulfur. This is something she says in passing really quick, so not a lot of people pick up on it. But sulfur is appropriate for the Wicked Witch of the West that is from the inner recesses of the earth, because that's where sulfur comes from. I mean, because sulfur can come from other places, but inside of the earth, like in, volcanic areas and stuff like that, you will smell sulfur. So it's appropriate that she left this smell of sulfur, which is another clue of the inner earth. But Dorothy needs to go to the Wizard of Oz, according to this lady. She really doesn't, which is kind of messed up, but she needs to go on this quest. She needs to get lost in Oz. She has to. You have to get lost so that you can be found, or so that you can find yourself, right? You can't find yourself if you're not lost. She's going to represent, and she's going to take Toto with her, but she's going to represent the people of the Tet who disperse from the central area, from the North Pole. They disperse, they become lost, they have to become lost so that they can come back together and find themselves and remember their identity, essentially. So she says, where do I start? It's always best to start at the beginning. That's something that a wizard would definitely say, or a witch, if you will, right? And that's reasonable, right? We forget simple things like that in this day and age. Start at the beginning. Well, where is the beginning of our world? It's at the middle of our world. She says, you need to follow the yellow brick road. And she shows her the yellow brick road, which is spiral form at the beginning, right where it starts. This is exactly the path of the sun whenever the sun starts spiraling inward during the apocalyptic cycle, where the earth is inundated by fire, right? The sun burns everything. It goes around and it ends up stopping at the North Pole. The opposite one is when the world is flooded, which I'll talk about towards the end. And that's whenever the sun goes too far outwards and it gets really big and turns red and stuff, and it disappears off to the sides. So this one right here they're showing you is Independence Day, represented by that sun spiral, which is that yellow spiral of brick, because the sun is baking the earth on its way to the North Pole in our modern world, which is right around the corner. So they say, follow the yellow brick road. That'll totally take you there, right? If you follow the sun when it spirals and it transgresses the tropics, where it's supposed to stop and come back in the summertime, if it keeps on going and it starts spiraling, you could just follow it and it will bake the land. Even when it goes over the ocean, it's possible that it might bake the sediment that's down at the bottoms of the ocean. If for some reason that ocean water is removed or something like that, if it actually baked what was left over, it would turn yellow because that type of clay, all that sediment and stuff that's at the bottom of the oceans, for the most part, is a bunch of dead organic material, shells and stuff like that, which when you turn it into clay and you bake it, it actually turns yellow. So it creates an actual yellow brick road. This is just a clip for an example of something that I did. This video was called Fimbulvinter. So if you'd like to know more about the mechanics behind how the sun transgresses the tropics and it spirals towards the North Pole, giving us the yellow brick road, go check out this video. Hey, it's me. I'm wearing the same thing. Check that out. Yes, so it's called Fimbulvinter. So go check out that one. It's on the Plasma Apocalypse playlist. Now, what is a brick? It says brick literally comes from the word break, something that is broken off, right? The sun breaks off of its normal cycle and it breaks apart and it breaks away from the tropics where it's supposed to come back. It breaks away. It also creates little pieces of broken ground called bricks. Now, she's following the yellow brick road and she gets to a fork. And she's like, man, what? Follow the yellow brick road? This thing splits up and it goes everywhere. There's no signs. Where am I supposed to go? There's a lot of symbolism here that I'm going to touch on real quick. One, symbolically, this is her path. And this is all of our paths, okay? And I say this all the time. It doesn't matter which of those yellow brick roads she took. They all go to Oz. Every single one of those life's experiences that she can make the choice. She's in the driver's seat. This is a choose your own adventure. She's like, I could go down that road and then the movie would have been totally different. I could go down this road and the movie would have been totally different, right? Either way, she would have ended up at Oz because the yellow brick road takes you to Oz no matter which deviation you take. So no matter what you do in life, you get to the goal. I believe this is my own philosophy. Okay. But I feel like we're all walking the yellow brick road. Now, some people get, they get in their feelings about it. And if you take a different yellow brick road than the one that they're on, then, they like to think that they're on the right path and therefore nobody else can be. I get it. I understand how that can make you feel safe and good about yourself and stuff, but that's not my philosophy. Anyways, yellow brick road. This also symbolizes those of the Tet who scatter, okay? So I consider myself one of the Tet, okay? I did a whole video about that already, but I'll have to come back to it. But if you want to check out that video, it's called Lost Tribe of the Tree of Life, okay? So those of the Lost Tribe of the Tree of Life scatter. We all take our own little roads and stuff, but eventually, over time, we return, we unite, and we meet up back at Mount Meru, at Oz, at the North Pole, etc. Now, she meets the Scarecrow, right, on her path. That's the first character that she meets, and this guy, throughout the whole thing, man, he's hard on himself. All of these characters are very hard on themselves. He starts off by saying stuff like, he doesn't have any brains. And that's all he wants is just a brain. I wish I had a brain. And he has a whole song about all the things he would do if he had a brain. Listen to what he says. This dude says the most genius stuff throughout the entire movie. The lion is constantly brave throughout the whole movie. The robot, what's that dude's name? The Tin Man. He's constantly heartfelt throughout the entire movie. They exhibit the things that they already have throughout the entire movie. He says some people without brains do an awful lot of talking, don't they? Genius. Genius. Well put. Well said, Scarecrow, because you have a brain. Now, this is also interesting because the wisest I've found, and this is my yellow brick road, but I have found that sometimes the wisest people I have met on my path never claim to be. They never come out and talk about how smart they are, how wise they are. They might even say stuff like, man, I wish I had a brain, but they're being humble. There's no need to declare how intelligent we are for people to believe that. It's self-evident. So she says, oh my God, I'm trying to get you down. I'm not sure how to do it. I don't know. He says, well, of course, I'm not bright about doing things, but if you just let the nail down, maybe I'll slip off. And so that's another thing that he does. Immediately, they're showing you that he is intelligent, right? He has to help Dorothy, who does have a brain, to figure out how to do it, right? The straw man, the Scarecrow. He says, oh, I'm a failure because I haven't got a brain. Now, this is an internal conflict, okay, that he's going through. And this, to me, suggests energetic flux. Something is wrong with the energy in the world because it's telling him something that's not true. You know what I mean? So they both say, well, let's go see the wizard. Maybe he can give you a brain. So they're both off to the wonderful world of Oz. She's hungry. She stops in this magical forest, right? There's always a magical forest on your way to some sort of legendary city or destination or whatever. They always have some sort of haunted forest. We just did Cabin in the Woods, right? That was another type of magical haunted forest, which is said to be at the North Pole. That's a haunted magical land. It doesn't mean it's all evil and full of monsters and you should just be scared of it. It's just as wondrous and wonder-filled and a wonderland. It has as much of the beautiful qualities as it does the scary ones. It just depends on you, what you're used to, what you're not used to. You know what I mean? So she goes to grab an apple off of one of these trees and whap, the tree totally smacks her hand. And he says, what are you doing grabbing my apples or whatever? And she's freaked out. These trees are alive, right? This is one of the first movies I ever saw that had talking, moving trees in it. The Lord of the Rings is probably another great example. There's many examples of trees that move about and stuff like that. I'm going to get to the Scarecrow in a second, but you'll see this a lot because in the world that is inundated with electromagnetic energy, in a world filled with magic, in a world filled with energy, especially if we stay the same size, us the survivors, if we stay a similar height, but our sons and daughters grow bigger and bigger and bigger, but we stay the same size, and especially if you're given a longer lifespan and you stay the same size for a very long time, as you watch Wonderland grow around you and you watch all these huge, gigantic flora and fauna, vegetation and animals and stuff getting bigger and bigger and bigger, you're also probably going to notice that the plants move quickly in comparison to today's world. In a weak energy spectrum, you take those same plants, you amplify them, you make them huge and big and vitalized, and their roots are going to do what roots do. Their little vines and stuff like that, they're going to move and they're going to wrap around things and they're going to grab things, just like the devil's snare in Harry Potter. So Genius, the Scarecrow, says, I'll show you how to get some apples. And he starts taunting the trees and they start throwing their apples. Another thing that the Scarecrow does that shows that he has intelligence already. Then they get up to the robot. I don't know. I'm not sure. He might be a robot. He might be like an actual knight or something, right? That's kind of what that reminded me of at first, that there were actual knights during the time of magic that fought Fantazoids and otherworldly creatures, and they dressed up and they put on full metal jackets, full metal armor, to keep electricity away. Like it was a full-on Faraday cage. Secondary is it would help to protect you against, horns and stuff from these otherworldly monsters that just came in or whatever. I don't believe, and I'm not convinced, nor have I been for quite some time, that this was used for fighting other humans. I could whoop a knight, like without any armor on. I know that there's YouTube videos and there's people out there like, oh, it's actually super, comfy and it's really agile and you could do all kinds of stuff in knight's armor. Nah, man, I don't think so. Especially post-apocalyptic Knight's armor that probably doesn't look all shiny and smooth and form-fitting and stuff like that. It probably looks more like that. You know what I mean? And if you were to wear something like that to protect yourself from the electricity that's now inundated in our world, if it rusts, you could actually get stuck in your armor. I hear it's not easy to put this stuff on or to take it off, right? It depends on the type of armor. He could also represent actual robots, right? Actual, like nobody inside of it. It's just a robot, right? That comes to life. Why? Because whenever that wicked witch of the East comes in, before she's cut off and stuff like that, she's possessing stuff. Or the red plasma in the plasma sphere wrapped around our world, when it reaches in to ground itself, it will possess objects and it will bring them to life. It becomes alive inside of a new body, which is how spirits work, right? So that leads to like, a type of Terminator kind of, Skynet type deal where inanimate objects come to life, which could also explain the Scarecrow. It could explain him being a robot, etc. And he says he wants to be human. So to me, I lean more towards that he represents an actual robot as opposed to, I know in the book, it was like he was a real person. He got chopped up into pieces and it's kind of weird and dark and stuff, but I'm going to go with he's probably a robot. So he doesn't have a heart because he's not human. One sec, I gotta... Man! Sorry about that. That felt great though. I love sneezing. Anyways. Now he's singing this song. He's like, he's singing his little If I Only Had a Heart song or whatever. And then all of a sudden, as he's singing, you hear another voice. And she goes, "Wherefore art thou, Romeo?" And each one of these characters starts looking around because they heard a voice come that's not his, right? Which also makes me feel like he's probably a robot because he might have the ability, if he is a robot, to tune in to like radio frequencies or something like that. So maybe just like Bumblebee in Transformers, how he can tune into the radio and sort of talk using the radio. I feel like that might be what the Tin Man's sort of doing when all of a sudden they hear this song being sang that none of them are singing all of a sudden, right? They don't question it or anything. So I assume that they understand that it might be coming from the Tin Man himself. And then he says, "I hear a beat. Boom, boom. How sweet." But he hears a beat. Immediately after this song starts playing that doesn't come from any of them because he might be like, have some radio abilities or whatever. Then he says, "I hear a beat," like a beat from a song. You know what I mean? So it sounds like it could be something like that. They go back through the haunted forest, magic forest, etc. Huge, huge trees all over the place. Dorothy even makes the point that it's dark. And that's what this forest is described as. It's described as being a lush jungle type of dark, huge forest. You know what I mean? Untouched by man for thousands of years, if ever. So then they start talking about how there's lions and tigers and bears in this particular forest. And if this represents the land at the North Pole that was taken off of our maps, I believe that that's where giant animals come from. I feel my research has indicated to me time and time again that I've seen example after example of inner earth stories where each person talked about how inside of the earth, there's huge animals, gigantic things that put to shame our elephants and our modern day giant beasts of the modern age, right? So it stands to reason for me personally, and it makes sense that lions, tigers, and bears, which are just gigantic cats and dogs to me, right, that they come from inside of the earth. And if that's true, then they would need an exit point, which would have to be some sort of entrance into the hollows of the earth. Could be dormant volcanoes or volcanoes that don't work, could be cavernous inner earth systems, and there are many of those said to be at that island, especially Mount Meru, right? Which also helps to explain why you get so many of those animals that are huge and gigantic and cannot swim that are native to islands where there's like no humans, or humans are just a recent addition, and these animals have been there for hundreds of years. Nobody can figure out, how did those animals get to those islands, right? Either there was no ocean, or they came up from inside of the earth and they just were stuck there because they're on an island. All right, so they meet the cowardly lion and he's like, "Which one of you first? I'll take you both on," etc. Right? I took a picture of this because every single one of them, they have one problem. Okay, it's not that this dude needs a heart. This dude already has a heart. It's not that this dude needs courage. Look at him; he's totally courageous right now. It's not that this dude needs a brain. It's not that she needs to go home. It's that they're scared. They're full of fear. Fear is their number one thing that they all have a problem with, right? They're all terrified. And that's something that they need to get over. And then the lion's like, I haven't slept in weeks, right? Because they call him out, and then all of a sudden he's scared again. He's like, I haven't slept in weeks. Just like Dorothy in part 2 says that she wasn't able to sleep. She had insomnia, right? That's one of the side effects of going into an energized world, is that you don't need to sleep. Now, some of us might translate that into being some sort of a problem. And if you think it's a problem, you might actually manifest problems because you think you're not getting enough sleep or whatever. But I'll tell you right now, and there's actually, like, I've seen references to this on Netflix and other movies and stuff where people cannot sleep or do not sleep. You know what I mean? And I think that's what happens when you're energetically charged. You don't need sleep. You know what I mean? And I feel like a lot of us these days, I feel like the energy is charging. Joe Santo, welcome, Joe Santo. The energy is charging up in our world leading up to a reset point right now. So that's why I feel like, me personally, I have not had very good sleep, not very good sleep lately. I don't sleep as much as I used to, even though I would like to, because my body physically is exhausted, but my soul is on fire. My soul is excited. My soul is awake. My soul does not want to go to sleep. My soul wants to research and talk about things, and you know what I mean? Anyways, so they all run up. They see Oz. There's a clearing in the forest, and that would be like Mount Meru, basically. Okay, so that would be smack right in the middle of that Wizard of Oz map. That would be Mount Meru in the middle of our old North Pole maps. And then they go through this field of poppies, right? And then poppies are, they have some kind of a drug inside of them that induces sleep, that it aids in sleep and stuff like that. I know they make it into other drugs like heroin and stuff like that, but you know, it's not something I need to get into. But imagine this. This is, now, if you just ran through a poppy field in the modern age, it might not do anything to you. But what might it do to you in another world where your living conditions are altogether different, and these flowers are huge and gigantic and humongous, and they put off ridiculous amounts of pollen and stuff like that? Now you're breathing it all in. I have a feeling like it's possible it could actually affect you in the world to come. So be careful around the plant life. Okay, Alice in Wonderland had to learn her lessons about the plant life. Dorothy's going to have to learn her lessons. You'll have to learn your lessons, and we'll have to get used to and remember how the new plant life acts and what is dangerous and what is useful, etc. He says, you can't rest now. We're nearly there. And all of a sudden the lion's like, oh yeah, me too. I'm totally tired. So he falls down, goes to sleep. Toto's passed out in the poppies. Everybody's passing out except for the Tin Man and the Scarecrow. The poppies don't seem to affect them whatsoever, because this is a chemical release, and they're showing you how it affects actual physical living beings, not reanimated beings that are not organic, right? Like the Scarecrow and the robot. So they're fine. They don't get tired. I mean, the robot, he starts crying because he does have a heart, and you know, he's in danger of rusting, but he's not tired or anything. It doesn't affect them. Now the snow falls down, boom, wakes them all up. They say, step into the light. There's a song playing. That's interesting. They're going to Oz and they say, step into the light. Oz is Mount Meru, where the light is. The most glorious place. Now check this out. They're supposed to be on another world. Okay, she got sucked up. She fell down from the sky. It's assumed that she's in a different place, and this is not Earth. But they say the most glorious place on the face of the earth. Mount Meru. Boom. The most glorious place on the face of the earth. Now, I don't say on the face of other worlds or something, you know what I mean? And I don't feel like it was a slip. I don't feel like, oh, it was just an accident. They're so used to calling things Earth or whatever. Felix, welcome to my channel. All right, so they take off into the Wizard of Oz, to Mount Meru, basically. They say, hold on to your breath, hold on to your heart, hold on to your whatever, right? Hold on to your breath. Why would they say that? Because you have to hold your breath. You have to hold on to your breath. You have to be... Basically, your breath gets sucked out of your chest when the world is depressurizing and all the atmosphere is being sucked up, just like in Spaceballs when they put the vacuum suck on the world or whatever. That happens, right? If a hole opens up in a pressurized environment, then it will be depressurized and all of the atmosphere will get sucked up and out of that world, which means that all the air that you're breathing will suddenly become a wind tunnel and it's not easy to breathe. So they say, hold on to your breath. Now check this out. I'm going to show you some interesting stuff. We talked about how she entered into Oz during the point in our world that we're about to go into, I believe, right? I feel that way strongly so far. During the summer solstice, right? During Independence Day. And I said that our sun, right, changes colors. Now, when the sun changes colors in the magical world, it's what I call the Hyperborean electrical arc theory. And it's got the anode mountain, the cathode mountain, and they create an electrical arc, which creates a purple flash. So the first sunlight that is seen in the magical world is purple, represented by this horse of a different color. The word horse is symbolic for Horus, or the sun, basically, the sun god, right? So purple horse, purple sun. Red horse, which is right next in line, right? Red sun. Or red sky, you could say, right? This is the purple dawn. This is the red dawn, or the red sky, the apocalyptic sky, the world of magic, etc. And then the last one, the yellow horse, the yellow sun. This is the sun being shown to you symbolically while they're up there. See that? Purple, red, yellow. Boom. Can't mistake it. It's insane. Let's see. Were they saying anything? They're just laughing and singing some songs. They get to Oz. Now, check out what happens when they get to Oz. They immediately need cleaning. Okay, they have to go through this. This is weird. They just showed this in the movie and don't explain it. They just kind of act like Oz is like a shopping mall and people are getting their nails done and it's just an awesome place and they're just helping us out. The legends and the myths that I have read and that I've gone over that talk about those beings, even movies and stuff like that, those humans who have dared to go to the ends of the earth, many times it says that they needed new bodies. That they had to actually peel their skin off, or that someone else would peel off their skin, take out their organs, clean their organs off and stuff like that. And then they would put them back and then they would zip it all up. I mean, this is my language, okay? But basically their bodies were sinful. Their bodies were evil. Their bodies had a remnant of entropy still there. So these wonder workers at the North Pole or whatever, right? Elven race. This is basically Santa's workshop. They took people apart. There's a Native American legend that talks about these brothers who went to go find where the sun lives, right? So they chased the sun, they went underneath the sky and stuff. And when they got to this particular place, the elders who lived there said, "Hey, that's against the rules. Sorry, you can't, we need to change your body. We just have to clean you up real quick." So it's a cleaning process. It also represents us spiritually and how we need to be clean when entering into the Garden of Eden. Okay, sin is not welcome there. Evil is not welcome there. Selfishness, all that type of stuff. That's all yuck. That's all pollutants for our spirit, for our body. So this is how they show you. They get you cleaned up before you can come in, or as a byproduct. Maybe because you came in, you get cleaned up. Either way, it's a place of cleaning, right? Sanitation. Whether you're tin or bronze, they're shining them up. And then she says, "Can you even dye my eyes to match my gown?" Dorothy has brown eyes, right? And she says, "Can you dye my eyes to match my gown?" Which I believe is a reference to the eyes actually lighting up depending on the energy that's inside, right? So if you have that red plasma energy, your eyes will probably light up red or in a red spectrum. If you have that blue energy, your eyes probably shine blue because your spirit is on the inside. Joe Santo. Thank you, Joe Santo. Super appreciate you. Thank you. Thank you. So your spirit lights up. It's magnified. It's increased, right? And when it's increased and it becomes strong enough, it's literally a light. There is a light inside of you. Right now, that light is dim, so people don't see the actual light force that's in there. It's energy. But when it's amplified and that energy becomes amplified, it becomes luminous. So your eyes glow. Which is also referenced in the book of Enoch at the birth of Noah, too. All right, so the Wicked Witch of the West is up in the sky. She's chemtrailing the crap out of the Wizard of Oz and stuff, just spraying her nastiness all over the place. On the other hand, she represents plasma. She represents energy, right? If you imagine that the sky is actually red, like how we've talked about, right? Or not, I'm sorry, not red. Remember how we talked about in the Hyperborean electrical arc theory, how we go from purple to orange to yellow, right? That yellow is very much like the back rooms. It's very like a monochromatic yellow color, right? Plasma and fire, especially hot plasmas and stuff like that, under a monochromatic light or a sodium vapor lamp, look like that. It looks like black fire just streaking around in the skies or whatever. So oftentimes in the world to come, when people see a certain type of plasma that isn't known for being evil or bad or dangerous or whatever, they see it as black. They see it as a black spirit. even though it's just because it's in a monochromatic world and it just comes out black. It's basically a black or white world, right? She says, surrender, Dorothy, and she's up there writing in the sky. Then we meet this guy. He's like the gate guard, and they're like, hey, can we talk to the wizard? He's like, I don't know. Wait right here. Now, I want to show you something on this dude's face. Fopow. Do you see this W made out of hair? That stands for wizard. That's because this dude is actually the wizard. Like, I know that's obvious to some, but to others it's mind-blowing. I think that they did his hair like this because he had fake tears that came out when he was pretending to cry during this one scene, and they had to hide that tube thing right above his eyes. That's a theory that I have on that. But he's the same dude as the door guy. Remember that guy? This gate guard is the same as the door guy, is the same as the guy who is riding the horse of a different color. Let's zoom in. I want to show you. Check this out. It's the same dude. Like, I don't know. I just think it's super. I mean, it's also Professor Marvel. So Professor Marvel, the horse guy, door guy, guard guy. It's all played by the Wizard of Oz. He puts on all these different outfits that trick people into thinking that he has some sort of authority. He's not. He's just changing his outfits. You know what I mean? He's just putting on different things so people see what he's wearing and they say, oh, he must be the guy who's in charge of that or whatever, which is exactly what we do when we put on uniforms and stuff like that, right? I don't care about uniforms. I wore a uniform for a very long time, and it didn't matter to me whatsoever. I just saw people. And I still see people. I see way past ranks. I see way past badges. I see way past diplomas. I see way past uniforms and stuff like that. I just see some dude and some girl wearing some uniform, some clothing. You know what I mean? To me, I'm not impressed. I'm not impressed. That's just me personally. I'm not impressed by uniforms. I'm not impressed by any of that. To me, it doesn't mean anything. It's just something that you're wearing. All right. So Professor Marvel, etc. Now he tells him to go away, or he tells him, I'm going to go get the wizard, and they're all waiting for him. And then the lion starts talking about how he wants to be the king of the forest, etc. And so they start asking him, you're not afraid of anything? He's like, no, if I was the king of the forest, I wouldn't be afraid of anything. Not even a rhinoceros? Listen to these animals that they list. Rhinoceros, hippopotamus, elephant, brontosaurus. Like, I know the scarecrow is smart and intelligent, but this is Oz. So do they have brontosauruses or elephants or hippopotamuses or rhinoceroses? Possibly. I believe that these are all referencing Fantazoids, right? It's a theory that I have, an ongoing theory that I've been working on for some time, that all of these strange-looking, alien-looking animals look that way because they are alien, that their ancestors are not from the surface. They're either from under the surface, or they drop down from the sky and they float down and they land here. Which is why a brontosaurus is mentioned, because a brontosaurus, in my book, is basically a Fantazoid. All right, so he says, courage, right? What's the whole point of this song? The whole point of this song is that we are all scared right now, okay? Many of us. I'm just speaking for myself, but I'm assuming there's others that feel similarly. We're all scared. There's a lot to be afraid of. The world's a scary place. We're scared that it's not going to stop. We're scared that it's going to get worse and keep on getting worse, and it's just never going to end, and the world just sucks, and we're scared that, you know, we might not find a home. At least that's me. I'm speaking for myself right now. So what does he say? What does the movie tell us to do? It encourages us through this song. He's saying you need to have courage when there's Fantazoids dropping out of the sky, when things coming up out of the ground, and when the lights are changing colors, and when all of the world you knew is flipped upside down. Don't panic. Don't freak out. Be courageous. Be strong. It's okay if you're scared, right? But be courageous. Be careful and brave. So they finally get to the Wizard of Oz, who looks like a traditional alien with a huge, gigantic head, just as we've talked about, right? And he says, bring me the broomstick of the Wicked Witch. Now, you see this weird thing at the middle there, too? I just noticed that, actually. Look at that. He's got these weird snake-looking deals with fire in the middle. Oh, it's hard to see that. Dang. Pow. See that? So that would be like an anode and a cathode. This is kind of like the Ark of the Covenant symbolism, basically. These would be like the two witnesses on either side who are witnessing the fire or the fires of God or the glory of God, etc., that is in the middle of it. And he says, bring me the witch's broomstick and I will grant your requests. Now he says, get out of here. He scares the crap out of the lion. The lion goes taking off. Ah! And you think he's just going to like bust through the doors that they came in? You know what I mean? Those huge doors or whatever. But he doesn't. He takes a hard right and jumps out of the window, right? Let me show you something. Hold on. He jumps out of the window. How high up are they? Because now I'm immediately concerned for the lion. Well, if you look out of the window, you can actually see one of the adjacent buildings right there. They all look like crystals or something that grow up out of the ground. But look, this building, like I would assume that we're right about here, equal to that other building. This is where the lion pretty much looks like he jumped out of, right? And then somebody online did this picture of it, which I thought was pretty funny. So you have the lion running down the hallway, takes a hard right, jumps through the window, and they've got him just plummeting. Like, now, I laugh at that because I think it's funny, and I need to laugh, and so do you sometimes. But here's the reality. Here's the truth in the movies. How could the lion have survived such a fall? Well, if there is an increased buoyancy factor in the world to come, which means that things weigh a lot less and they don't fall down as fast, you could do a superhero landing. It's possible and feasible that a person could gently land from much higher up than they would in this day and age, right? All right, so they need to go to the haunted forest. They need to go to the witch's castle to get her broomstick, which is also symbolic as well, because it's an item of power. It's a pole, it's a staff, etc., right? It's a beam. They need to get the witch's broomstick. Well, where does the witch's broomstick come from? If it's a beam, right? It says haunted forest, witch's castle, 1 mile away. I'd turn back if I were you. So it's around some sort of haunted forest. It's always going to be some sort of dark place. There's usually 3 places in these types of movies. I'll show you here. This is a map of Oz. So I'm going to start right here with Emerald City. This would represent Mount Meru at the middle of the world. If there is an anode and a cathode mountain, as I've put forth in my theories, right, the Hyperborean electrical arc theory, then we would have a dark mountain and a light mountain, right? A negative side and a positive side. This over here is Winky Peaks. This is the dark side. This is where the Wicked Witch of the West lives. Now, if we have an arc, we need another mountain, an electrical mountain opposite of that. So let's pull out, zoom on back, and here we see the other one. You see that? This would be the anode, right? Which is giving away energy. This would be the neutral point, Mount Meru. And this would be the cathode, which is receiving energy. That's why this is the land of light and goodness and everything positive, and there's a lot of stuff there or whatever that's, very healthy or whatever. And this is a dangerous place. This is a place that can kill you. This is a place where there's evil and abundance and darkness and death and decay and whatnot, right? Because it's actually decaying. If it acts as an anode and a cathode in some sort of an electrolysis type system, that the anode would decay. I think I have a picture of that to show you later. All right, so they're going through the haunted forest. This is really interesting too, because it's come up with like the Mandela effect and whatnot. As you can see, they have weapons all of a sudden, which I assume were given to them by the people in Oz, which means that the people in Oz have access to guns, which was really interesting. The Scarecrow totally has a gun, right? I mean, like, I would have put him out in front, right? He's pretty clumsy. I don't know if I would have given him a gun, or at least I would have made him walk in front of everybody, but he falls down about 30,000 times in this movie. I don't know. Not a good idea. And then the lion has witch remover, right? For like huge bugs, basically. This looks like bug spray, and it's appropriate. It should be bug spray because it would have come in handy had they not cut out the scene with the jitterbug. There was a bug. I'll talk about the jitterbug in just a second. All right. And then we got the Tin Man who has a wrench. So he's got metal to fight off the plasma or whatever, right? All right. So they move on, and the lion is like, this place is full of spooks. Spooks means ghosts, right? Paranormal activity, right? Which is something you would expect to see in areas of high energetic charge. Paranormal activity, plasma balls, fairies, all that stuff, right? And of course the Scarecrow, I don't know. He worries me, man. I would not want him having a gun. All right. So he asks the Tin Man, the robot, do you believe in spooks? And he's like, no, I don't believe in spooks. And then while he's talking, he gets sucked up into the sky. Keep in mind, he's the only one that this happens to. And he's the only one that is made out of metal. And they're on this anode island that gives away energy, right? Gives it away. It doesn't pull it in or anything. I don't know. It seems to me that there's something with electromagnetism and the fact that he's made out of metal and why he's singled out as getting pulled up into the sky. Also, it's symbolic of the rapture. It's symbolic of Kronos eating his children. It's symbolic of the depressurization and increased buoyancy and people floating up into the sky. He does land back down on the ground. They all go to console him. And then the witch is like, I want my monkeys to go get him. And don't worry, I've sent a little insect on ahead. So she sent some sort of an insect. And she tells the monkeys this too. Usually people don't pick up on it because like it happens so quickly. But she says she sent a bug to go fight against them in that forest area, right? It's called the jitterbug, basically. And then she says, fly, 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 which is way wrong. She's not supposed to say that, right? It's a Mandela effect. I remember her clearly saying, fly. Now, she says, now fly my pretties. That's what it's supposed to be. I don't know if I'm in the right world right now. I don't know if this is the right reality. I don't know if something shifted. I don't know what's going on with me personally. However, this is new to me. Okay, there's many Mandela effects that blow my mind. The Berenstain Bears, this is one of them too. It's really interesting. So she sends out her flying monkeys from the abyss, which reminds me of like the locusts of the Book of Revelation, right? Or like a type, right? So they come back. There's this whole scene of them fighting the monsters. They don't do the jitterbug, by the way. So let me tell you about the jitterbug. She sends this weird jitterbug creature, which looks like Jim Carrey in The Mask, I guess. It was this whole scene that didn't fit the movie, so they ended up cutting it out. But this jitterbug, what it did is it made them dance, right? It made their bodies start shaking and moving and stuff like that. And so they had this whole scene where they all went into this dance routine and it was like the jitterbug was controlling them. I believe that's symbolic of whatever gases or whatever is released in these types of places, that if people are not careful, they can actually start convulsing. They go into convulsions and stuff. And this is not the first time that has happened. There's been a dance outbreak. There's been a laughter epidemic and a laughter outbreak. And this is what happens when you have strange gas clouds that go through cities and stuff like that. And people are unaware of it because, you know, they don't check for it or whatever. So they can go into convulsions and it looks like they're just rocking out, but you know, it's not. It's just that they're in the wrong spot, basically. And they were attacked by the jitterbug, who also has a dual symbolism for Fantazoids, right? These insect-looking alien creatures that come down or whatever. The jitterbug. All right. So we go to the witch's castle. She comes out cackling. And you notice her little guard dudes all have green faces too. So it's not that she just has a green face because she's bad or she's evil. So all the evil people have green faces or anything. It's not true. This is just her race, right? They are the similar race, whatever this race is. I don't know. I didn't do that much study on it, but it seems to me that they're like a very similar race or whatever. So she represents some sort of a race, which we've already been told it's the goblins, that she's basically a female goblin. And these are her little goblin minions or whatever. And they're said to be green. They're said to be green. Listen to what she says. Ring around the rosy, a pocket full of spears. What? Where did that come from? That's not even close to how it goes. You know what I mean? Yes, there's a bunch of spears. Maybe she's just cheesy. I don't know. I'm not sure. But let's talk about this since they brought up Ring Around the Rosy, since they talk about and allude to nursery rhymes or lullabies and stuff like that. Many of you are familiar with this. Ring around the rosy, pocket full of posies. Right? All these nursery rhymes about bells and all this various things, right? They harken back to the plasma apocalypse. Now, it wasn't always ring around the rosy. It started off as ring a ring of roses. Ring a ring of roses. So ringing a ring means to put a circle around a circle. You ring a ring. Okay, so a circle and then a smaller circle inside of it. Ring or put a ring around a ring of roses. That inner circle, okay, let me tell you, for those of you who are new, what I'm referring to. When the world depressurizes, a hole blows out in the top of our sky. It creates two circles, okay? One is a huge, bigger circle, and one is a smaller inner circle that is actually the hole in the sky. That inner circle is lit up red because there is red spectrum plasma right behind it coming into our world. And that is symbolically the roses. Sometimes it's a carnation or different red flowers, right? And it's a ring of roses. It's seen as many other things, but that's one of them symbolically. So the kids would say, ring of roses, pocket full of posies. Now, what is a posies? Most people would just assume that it means like a bunch of flowers, right? But if we look up the word posy, it says it's a short poetic motto engraved in the inner surface of a ring, exactly like in the movie The Ring, right? When they had like a little motto that was engraved inside of the ring on the inside of it, that was a posy. That's what a posy is. So a posy originally was like a poem, basically, right? Poetry. It was a verse. And over time, it came to have the meaning of a bunch of flowers because people would, hey, what's up, Freight Train? Good to see you. A bunch of flowers would often be given with poetry. They were seen as being hand in hand. So the one became the other. The poetry word became the word for a bunch of flowers, right? So if we re-say this poem, it's a ring that has ringed. This is hard to say. It is a ring of roses that has a ring around it. And then the people down here have pockets full of poetry. Pockets full of lullabies, pockets full of nursery rhymes, pockets full of reminders about that ring of roses in the sky, right? But they paid them no mind. A tissue, a tissue. It doesn't always say a tissue. Sometimes it says ashes, ashes, ashes. We all fall down. So the people did not pay any mind to their lullabies, to their poems, to their old wives' tales, to their myths, to their legends, to their movies. And they were victims of the plasma apocalypse. It's a reminder that we taught children so that we would not ever forget it. All right, so the witch catches Scarecrow's arm on fire and she's like, don't throw that water. Now, let me tell you something. This is so crazy. She's allergic to water, okay? She dies. Why would you even have water? Like, in your castle, anywhere. I don't even care if it's to put out fires or whatever. You know what I mean? Like, you should not have water in your castle, right? Don't throw that water. There happens to be a bucket of water right next to her, you know? Crazy. It's interesting. But the reason it's crazy and interesting is because of all the truth that lies within that, right? You ever see that movie Signs where the aliens came and there's all those, Mel Gibson owned a farm and on his farm there was all these crop circles that were being formed and aliens came down and stuff. And the simple thing that killed all the aliens was just drinking water, regular old water, right? Remember, we're looking at the magical world. When they go through their apocalyptic event, which should be at the end of their movie or the beginning of the movie, right? Because it's the beginning and the end. When they go through their apocalyptic event, water falls from the sky, not fire. We started off with the fire one with the spiral and stuff like that, but this is how we end. We end with the water catastrophe, which is, this is a small scale, but it's symbolizing it, right? They are doused. She's covered in water. The old ways, the witches, the magic, etc., is doused with water. How does that happen? I'm just going to quickly tell you my theory. The blue beams fill up during the time of magic, and they fill the sky with oxygen, right? A whole bunch of oxygen in our sky for an eternity, or for an age, I should say, right? However long those beams are there, they're filling up the upper sky with pure oxygen. The sky opens, and when they go from their magical red sky world into our blue sky world of no magic, where the blue beams disappear, the pillars of the sky fall down or whatever, right? The sky opens and the Wicked Witch of the East, being the red plasma that comes in from space, smashes into that. That plasma is hydrogen. When the hydrogen plasma smashes through that huge ocean of oxygen, it literally creates a huge ocean and it drops buckets and pails, not rain, not small little drops of rain. I'm talking about just downpour all over the place. It creates water up in the sky. We don't have that up there right now because we don't have a whole bunch of blue beams filling our world with oxygen or whatever, right? What? Who is that? Who is that? 4Jax. Hey, thanks 4Jax. Thank you for giving the gift of memberships to other people. Super appreciate you. And Pamela Swan jumps on it. Good to see you too. All right, cool. So the Wicked Witch melts, right? You can see that she gets hit by the water. She goes down and she melts down into the ground. If she represents, her castle represents the anode, okay? The thing that loses all of its life or loses all of its energy. Or it doesn't have to be a bad thing. It could be seen as sacrificing itself to give energy to other things, right? Doesn't always mean it's negative. But here's an example of an electrolytic system, anyways, here's an example where we have the anode on this side, the cathode on this side, and you can see that over time, this sludge builds up underneath the anode side. So this would be the witch's castle, basically, right? And when it's covered in water, when all that water drops down, first there's an electrical arc because the electricity is traveling through the air during the red sky because the air is mist. It's all mist. All the ocean water gets sucked up into the sky. The sky itself, the atmosphere is pulled apart. There's a lot of salt, basically, sodium in the air and stuff like that. And so the electricity can use the air itself as a medium to travel from from the anode to the cathode. And it creates an electrical arc, right? If it does that for an entire age, then this mountain right here should start probably sinking or at least becoming smaller and smaller and smaller as pieces of it erode and degrade, and they fall off and they create this sludge up there in the Arctic areas, right? That's why sometimes you'll hear about like areas of the Arctic Ocean that in the old days were very sludgy and muddy and stuff like that, swampy and stuff. That's because there's all this anode mud because that electrical arc was up there in the sky, but when all the waters come down, it switches and the electricity travels through the water itself, right? Underwater, which means that this mountain starts to go away. It starts to sink. All that sludge comes off of it and it degrades. So that's when the water was thrown onto the witch, basically, and she starts to melt, which is totally possible. Here's an example of water. These are the chemicals that make up water, just in case you're unaware. But here's an oxygen atom. So the oxygen shoots up into the sky. The little hydrogen atoms comes from the magenta red plasma from below. They smash into each other and the oceans drop. Boom. Into the water world, into the blue sky. Nagagato, $33. Thank you. Man, that's awesome. $50, $33. That's great. Thank you so much. Seriously, for all of you, no matter how much you donated, thank you very much. This popcorn right here represents real food that I buy my son. So, and myself. I get myself food too. So thank you. All right. So here's an example of the floodwaters, right? Now we go back to the witch's castle and you think these dudes are all evil because they work for the queen. They're not. They needed to be liberated. Right? None of them was strong enough to stand up to her power. She represents an energetic force in our world, not a person, not a government agency, not a president, not a queen, not a pope, not nothing. It represents an invisible entity, which is then followed suit by physical entities. But the invisible one is first. When that invisible entity or the wicked witch or the evil in our world dissipates and it goes away, we go through another reset, our world is filled with goodness once again. These people are slaves to the god of this world, the negative, the devil, the satanic energy, whatever you want to call it. Anyways, we get back to the wizard and they find out that, he's just a human guy or whatever. And they start talking about like, hey, what about our stuff that we wanted? I wanted a brain. I wanted a heart. She wanted to go home, right? And he's like, check this out, Scarecrow. You might not have a brain, but these people with brains, they have something that you don't. You need this thing so that you can feel smart about yourself. I'm going to give you a diploma. So he hands the Scarecrow. Now, check this out. This dude represents coming from Kansas, okay? So his magic is our modern magic, okay? It's a form of trickery, essentially, right? He's tricking them all. He's reintroducing, because they have just gone through they've gone through their own apocalyptic cycle, right? Which means that this world of magic is going to start transitioning into our world. This is how it starts. This is how the Wizard of Oz helps to mess up this entire world by introducing some concepts that are evil magic in our modern day and age in the form of degrees and certificates and diplomas and all that garbage that you don't even need. Okay. An honorary degree of THD. It's a doctor of thinkology. That means he's allowed to think because he's been approved to think. That's today. Not movie, not fantasy, not a long time ago, not something that's in our future. That's now. Right now, we are being taught in many different ways. Spells are being cast, okay? We're being taught that you're not allowed to think unless you have a piece of paper that says so. I mean, in some instances, I can understand because, the world's, it's idiocracy and people are not super smart. Anyways, so he gives him this piece of paper, and all of a sudden he goes, the sum of the square roots of any two sides of an isosceles triangle is equal to the square root of the remaining side. Oh joy, I'm smart now. Here's the problem. Everything he just said when he said that super fast is wrong. That's not true. You could Google this. You could look it up yourself. You could research this. The sum of the square roots of any two sides of an isosceles triangle, right? It's not an equilateral, but it's like a little isosceles triangle, is equal to the square root of the remaining side. That's not true at all. That doesn't form an isosceles triangle at all. So he's all excited that he has this trivia. That's totally not true. He was way smarter all throughout this movie. He was genius. He was wise. He was intelligent, man, and he didn't need approval. The second he gets approval from somebody, he turns into an idiot. I'm sorry. I like the Scarecrow, but he just lost his intelligence. He didn't gain any. You know what I mean? It's a fake form of intelligence because it's just approval from somebody else. Same thing goes for the lion. He's like, oh, and where I come from, we give brave people this symbol to let everyone else know that they're brave people. You don't need a symbol. You don't need a badge. This is military garbage. That doesn't belong in the world. Not in my world. Not where I'm from, wherever that is. A heart is not judged. Now listen, he's trying to have this heartfelt talk with the Tin Man. He said, listen to what this dude says, okay? A heart is not judged by how much you love others, but by how much you are loved by others. No. I don't think so. That's the opposite of my own personal philosophy, okay? I would like my heart to be judged on how much my actions are loving towards others. That's how I should be judged. I do not want to be judged. Let God hear this. Let anybody hear this. I do not want my amount of love to be judged based on how many other people love me, especially in this world where it's just full of trolls and goblins and, you know what I mean, messed up people that just would be real quick to say something bad about you or whatever. No, I completely and this dude, look at his face. He is wholeheartedly convinced that he's just dropping some serious wisdom onto the Tin Man. Poor Tin Man. I could not disagree with that more, basically. Now he says, well, you forced me into a cataclysmic decision. This is what they wrote down for him to say. They chose the word cataclysm purposefully because it's all symbolizing that they're going through an apocalypse, basically. Cataclysmic cycles. He says, the only way to get Dorothy back to Kansas is for me to take her there myself. No problem. I could totally do that. Why? Why do you need to go? You don't need to go. You literally, in the next slide, you're about to tell everyone you don't even know how to work the balloon. Why do you need to go? You don't need to go with her. Something weird is going on here where the old man wants to take a trip with the underage girl. I don't know. I think that's kind of weird. And he represents like the leaders of our modern world today, you know. That's all I'm going to say about that. But, you know, it's kind of weird, right? The only way for her to get back to Kansas is for me to take her. I have no idea how to get there. I don't know how to use my own balloon, but I'm definitely going to go with Dorothy in a basket by myself. He says, I was petrified, which is also a shout out to actually being petrified, right? And then he takes off. This is funny because I didn't record it, but you can see the actor who is the robot, the Tin Man. He totally just undoes he's pretending like he's not undoing it, but he's totally undoing this balloon, right? It's totally his fault. Anyways, the balloon becomes undone and they're like, come back. He's like, I can't come back. I don't know how it works. And yet he wanted to take the underage girl with him to get her back to another world. He doesn't even know how to do it. You know what I mean? He just, well, let me just get back in my balloon. I'm sure we'll end up in Kansas. He says, I can't come back. I don't know how it works, etc. Blah, blah, blah. Also, he represents the leaders of the modern world that have escaped and gone to other worlds to establish themselves as the leaders of that world. People who bring technology, people who retained their memories because others might not, and people who will be looked up to and thrust into positions of power, prestige, honorary positions and titles that means that over time they get power, right? This is him leaving all of his people during a cataclysm that he himself referenced, just taken off, right? Like something bad, I feel like something really bad is about to happen to Oz. And if you watch part 2, something bad did happen to Oz right after this. So this represents our world leaders leaving us behind on their spaceships or whatever, NASA, Elon Musk, all those people, and just taking off during an apocalyptic event so that they don't have to hang out during the aftermath of it. He says goodbye, and all the people are so excited to wave him off. Goodbye. Oh, good luck. Good luck. I hope you get to Mars. Good luck. I hope you get to the moon. I hope you get to space. Good luck. And the second they're gone, cataclysm strikes. And now they're not going to be so happy. They're not going to be like, come back. Come pick us up. Take us with you. No. This has been planned out for quite some time. Dorothy says... Oh, they're like, well, Dorothy, what did you learn? Right? So the fairy chick comes back and she's like, you had the power to go all along, but you had to learn your lesson, which is kind of messed up, but it's also kind of true. She says, well, here's what I learned. If I ever go looking for my heart's desire again, I won't look any farther than my own backyard, right? Which is twofold, okay? On the surface level, they're teaching all of you that you shouldn't be explorers. That's the surface level. Many people are going to pick up on that and they're going to be like, I should just be happy at home. There's no need to go explore and to go check things out. Phil, not Bill. Hey, thank you, man. I super appreciate it. $20. Thank you, Phil, not Bill. Anyway, so let's get back to this. We're almost done now. Don't look any further than your own backyard. Basically, don't be an explorer, right? Just like on the Truman Show, and they were trying to teach Truman, like, hey, there's no need to explore. It's already been discovered or whatever. But that's on the surface. If we go deeper than the surface, what she's saying is, her heart's desire lies in the backyard of the world, of the earth. What is the backyard of the earth? Check this out. In Hopi, in the Native American Hopi folklore and creation stories and whatnot, it says, in the course of their migration, the Hopi are a part of some of my brothers who have that remnant of the blue beam. Okay? I'm not saying they all do just because they're Hopi, right? But I'm saying that that's where they come from. All right? Is from Tartaria, from the land up north, etc., right? That's just one of the tribes. There's many of them. But it says, in the course of their migration, each Hopi clan was to go to the furthest extremity of the land in every direction. Far in the north was a land of snow and ice, which was called the back door, the backyard of our world. But this was closed to the Hopi. However, the Hopi say that other people came through the back door into the fourth world. The backyard of our world is where you find your heart's desire, basically. And then, okay, so check this out. She walks up, this is so funny. She walks up to the robot, to Tin Man. She's like, high five, Tin Man. It was nice hanging out with you. She walks up to like the lion. She's like, right on line, give me some, boom. Nice to see you. She walks up to the scarecrow and it gets intimate. She's like, oh, I will miss you most of all. And look how close they are. Watch this. Boom. Look, like there's something going on there, right? And then she gives him a kiss, like sort of a borderline lip cheek kiss. You know what I mean? There's a reason for that. It's not because Hollywood's perverted and whatever, stuff like that, right? It's because in the original script, the dude who plays the Scarecrow back in the monochromatic Kansas world, he was dating Dorothy. Like they were hot on each other, and that's who this is. So that's why she's giving him such an intimate hug or whatever, right? All right, so she says, tap your heels 3 times. I want to point this out, and this is going to be difficult for me to describe to you because this is my own experience, and it doesn't come from like a lot of, I don't know, it comes from many different places. But the tapping of the heels 3 times, I'll get to the slippers. The tapping of the heels is 3 bangs, 3 loud bursts, 3 explosions that I've always come across. I don't have a lot of, they're just small little references that I've seen in movies. Like, for example, in Back to the Future, next time you watch Back to the Future, listen to the DeLorean. It will make 3 consecutive banging noises. 3 times. It's always these 3 knocks, 3 bangs, 3 explosions, 3 thuds, 3 somethings, right? And I have a feeling that those are the sounds of the plasma volcanoes up north, the anode, the cathode, and the middle one, all exploding. Right? Anyways, it's just one of my theories. All right, let's move forward. So she has to tap her ruby slippers. Remember, in the book, they were silver. slippers. That's interesting, right? So they're intended to be silver, not ruby. Now, rubies have a correlation with Mount Meru as well, because it's said that Mount Meru is the cave of treasures. It's the cave of wonders. It's filled with all sorts of precious gems and jewels and stuff like that, which you should not touch. Like, I also get that from the movies. Don't touch that treasure. Do not seek the treasure, right? Because there's something way better than physical treasure, basically. Anyways, and you could get electrocuted. But her shoes were originally silver, and silver is one step away from being copper, right? I believe in transmutation of metals, and I believe that through electricity, we can actually manipulate metals to turn into other metals, right? So, for example, I brought up this article right here that says, did you know that billions of years ago, there was no silver anywhere in the universe? So where did it come from? I'm not saying I support that idea, but bear with me, right? Like most other elements in the periodic table, silver was created in dying stars. And in the cataclysmic supernova, that's why I highlighted that, cataclysms, right? Silver is made during cataclysms. And in the cataclysmic supernova explosions that sometimes marked their final demise. This is the only place where temperatures got hot enough to fuse hydrogen nuclei together. So that hydrogen that's above, it comes down and it's really good at exchanging electrons with other elements, right? It's really good at transmuting metals, basically. So that's why whenever you research the North Pole and the different types of metals that you can find up there, copper comes up a lot, silver comes up a lot, gold comes up in the biblical Garden of Eden, places like that. And I believe it's because of existing metals that were changed or transmuted by electricity. So the copper mountain or mountains become silver. Interesting, right? Now, she's back at home. She wakes up. Aunt Em is like, you just had a bad dream. She's trying to talk about Oz to everybody, right? This is what gets her in trouble in part 2, is this scene right here. She should have not talked about Oz. The first rule, right? The first rule of Fight Club, the first rule of Oz, the first rule of Wonderland, the first rule of truth seeking or whatever. Like, you don't talk about it, man. These people don't get it. They don't understand. They're not of the same vibe as we are. So I know you're dying to talk about it, but find someone that understands to talk about it. Aunt Tim's like, no, that's not true. You're delusional. You had just had a bad dream. I hope, she's going to end up thinking that it's not a bad dream. She's got mental problems and she's going to send her to shock therapy, which is insane, right? Now, this guy shows up at the farm. Oh, here's her boyfriend. There's a scarecrow boyfriend. That's why she's, holding his face and stuff. He's like, your old pal Hunk. His name is Hunk. You know what I mean? Like, anyways, no, Aunt Em, this was seriously a real place. I totally wasn't dreaming. Aunt Em's like, she's probably thinking about like a newspaper article about shock therapy right now. I don't know. Anyways, that's the end of the movie, The Wizard of Oz. I had a blast. 570 people watching. I think that's probably the most ever, which is pretty cool. I hope that you enjoyed this segment. I like to do this segment once a week. If you're interested in my theories, my ideas and stuff, do check out my book. It's called Ancient Oblivion, The Plasma Apocalypse. Thank you for all of the good reviews, to everyone who's been writing good reviews. And my website, too, has a lot of really good audio and visual examples of the things that I have just gone over with you in this movie and many, many more. I have an entire playlist with over 80 different movies that I've broken down in the exact similar way as the one that you just saw. So if you enjoyed this one, the chances are good you might enjoy some more. Until next time, I'm JayDreamerZ saying good vibes and goodbye.
So hard to fade away. I try so hard to fade away, but something's forcing me to stay.
vast multitudes.